right, this week we're going to continue with the story of David, the early stories of David. We talked about how in 1 Samuel chapter 16 he was anointed, chosen by God, and that he was a skilled musician, which actually got him into the king's palace. Did some amazing things there. Now we're going to look a little bit at when he first became really public, and that was through the encounter with Goliath. This is in 1 Samuel chapter 17. I want you to just recap the story. The Philistines were the enemies of the Israelites, and they were for forever. And they would go to battle. Saul took them into battle, and Goliath was a Philistine who was a giant, 9 foot tall, the warrior, the prize fighter, the champion, truly the champion that he was. And so instead of everybody just go out and fight, Goliath came out and defied Israel, mocked them, and said, your God is no good, and you're a bunch of wimps, and you're dogs, and he just went on. And he says, here's the deal. He says, you send somebody out to fight me. You choose anybody you want to come out and fight me. And if I win, you become our slaves. But if he wins, we'll serve you. So that was the deal. A couple interesting things about this. The Israelites didn't have to agree to that. That's something that's overlooked in here. This just shows you how Saul was not fit to be king. First of all, why would you agree to that? There's no way that anybody in Israel could defeat the giant. You couldn't do it. So, if I were there, I'm thinking, I don't think this is a real good deal. No, we're not going to take those odds. You're going to have to deal with all of us, right? I mean, it's not like it's a football game with all kinds of rules and referees. It's war. We're all coming, going to attack you and kill you. But they agreed to these rules, that's the first thing that shows that Saul was not fit at this point to lead the people of Israel. So why would you agree? So I guess I would encourage you, be careful with the terms you agree to, because sometimes we are agreeing to the terms that are set forth by the devil, and they're not set forth by God. And so we are readily agreeing to the rules the devil sets down, and maybe he puts parameters on what we can do. And I think it's really good to ask the question, well, who said we have to do that? Or who said we couldn't do this? Because we need to abide by the parameters that God puts on our life, but we do not have to follow standards and rules that the devil sets for our life, or that an evil world sets on my life. Somebody says, well, you can't go there and give Bibles to those people. I would always ask the question, well, why not? Who says I can't? And it just takes somebody to be a little bold at times and watch what God can do. So that's the first thing I want you to see. Don't follow the devil's rules, and don't agree to it. Don't get into a contract with the enemy setting up the standards. Rather, you set the rules under God's orders and follow those. The second thing I want you to see here is Goliath said, hey, send somebody out to fight me. Well, if you read through the book of Samuel, you do find that Saul is not just the king. He's the biggest, strongest guy. He's the one who should have done it if they agreed to these rules, which they did, and somebody was to come out. The biggest, strongest, toughest guy was Saul. So Saul should have been the leader, but he didn't. He shrunk with fear. He was like everybody else. He just lacked courage, and he just kept shrinking back, and he'd look down the line and there was nobody there. So this guy Goliath was mocking the God of Israel, and watch what he did. So he came out one day and he did this, and he set the terms and they agreed to him, and here we go. So the next day, everybody, all the warriors in Israel got up, they got dressed, they put their gear on, they got their swords, they put their helmets, whatever they did the whole thing. They came out to the line, ready for battle. Saul's there, they're all there. Goliath comes out and says, "You dogs." He says, "Anybody going to fight me? Anybody? Anybody going to take me on?" Watch what happened. The Israelites all went, "Ugh," and they left. You know what they did the next day? Came back out. Put on their armor, did this, all that stuff, ready for battle. Goliath says, "Anybody?" They go, "Ugh." They did this for 40 days. So it wasn't like one time they realized that we can't beat him. 40 days they were reminded that they are weak and that they cannot do it and there's nobody there. And for 40 days they kept agreeing to his terms. Why didn't 12 guys go out and kill Goliath? Why did they keep agreeing? But and the more they agreed, the more the rules became standards and policies, and we could never break this. And so they got so swept up and so into this system that they forgot that they could be outside of the system. And imagine after 40 days how much courage they would have. They'd have no courage. They would think of themselves as zero. We're the worst army. We're the worst team out here. We can't do anything right. We don't have any strength. We probably don't have any food and all that stuff. So the morale of the army is gone. And Goliath keeps getting bigger. And they're telling stories back at camp. I don't think we could beat them and all that stuff. And the Philistine army, they're partying every night. They're getting excited. They're charged up like, dun, 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 we're the best. We have Goliath. And on it went for 40 days. Now, behind the scenes, God's doing something. He's always doing something behind the scenes. You see, the people in the middle of this that should have been defeating it weren't. But you know what God's doing? He's like, you know what? I need to bring an outsider in. So once again, David's with his sheep. Jesse, his father, gives them basically a lunch and says, take this lunch to your brothers. That was his only job. Interesting thing, just you can have some fun with this. In the New Testament, there was a young man who had a lunch one day, and Jesus took it, fed 5,000 people. So in this case, David goes out, takes the lunch to the brothers who were all in the battle. Remember these guys who were bigger and stronger than David and better or whatever? And so he goes to battle, and the morning comes, and I guess it's the 40th day, and they all come out. Goliath comes out. They do the whole mocking thing, and then everybody turns and goes away. And David says, wait, what's going on here? What are you guys doing? Why? What? Hey, dude, hey, totally fresh eyes. Who's right off of the fields, is a worshiper and a worship leader, and is a warrior who can do lots of pretty cool things. He comes in and he immediately sees this is not right. And he says, what's going on here? Why is nobody fighting him? And he's thinking, I could kill him. This is no problem. Well, his brothers immediately shut him up, and they say, hey, just get out of here. Go back to your stupid sheep. And David says, what, now I can't even talk? So he immediately realizes the whole system is wrong. And then the one whose side he should be on says, well, you can't do that because we don't work like that. We just come out here and we line up and then we go home. That's all we do. David says, I don't think so. We got to do things differently. And they said, get out of here. Just quiet. He says, I can't even talk now. And so boldness, all of the army of Israel is losing courage. David is gaining courage, and he's getting encouraged. He's getting bolder. And he says, man, he says, I'll show you, brothers. I can just picture him. He says, can't I even speak? And he turned away and he said to someone else, and he says, somebody overheard what David was saying and reported to Saul. Saul sent for him, and David said to Saul, let no one lose heart on account of this Philistine, your servant, says I'll go and fight him. I love that. He ties in two things. He says, let no one lose heart. Well, listen, courage has been gone. It's gone. There is no courage. David says, hey, I got some courage. Don't let anybody else lose any courage. And Saul replied, you're not able to go out and fight against this Philistine and fight him. You're only a boy, and he's been a fighting man from his youth. And David basically saying, I'm not listening to any of you guys because all of you are full of discouragement. You need to be careful when people, maybe they're Christians, maybe they're in your church, maybe they're even a partner in ministry, who is continually telling you why you can't do something. When somebody is always telling you why you can't do something, I really encourage you to step back and say, you know what? I can't listen to this. And then sometimes you need to stand right up to them and say, stop. He says, I can kill this giant. But you can just stop right there. I don't want to hear it. God has given me that giant, and I'm taking him on. Imagine in your life if you had listened to all the people who told you what you couldn't do. Oh my gosh. I've had so many in my life, so many people. I've done a lot of crazy things in my life, a lot of things that you shouldn't have been able to do. And all of them came with somebody saying, you can't do that. Right? Now, I've also had lots of people who were the encouragers who said, you can do this. So you've got the discouragers and the encouragers. Be careful which one you're listening to. David was surrounded by discouragers, ones who take the courage out, right? That take the courage out. And he said, David said to Saul, he says, hey, your servant has been keeping his father's sheep. When a lion or a bear came and carried off a sheep, I could just picture David getting a little cocky. He says, when a lion or bear came and took one of my sheep, hey, guess who took down the lion? This guy right here. Guess who took down the bear? This guy right here. And he says, your servant has killed both the lion and the bear. This uncircumcised Philistine will be like one of them. He's defiled the armies of the living God. The Lord who delivered me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear will deliver me from the hand of the Philistine. You got to hear that the entire army of Israel was afraid. The king was afraid. Goliath felt pretty great, and the Philistines who were behind the Goliath were partying up because nobody could beat their giant. The only person who stood alone was David, because he was encouraged from the Lord, and he knew that that Goliath wasn't mocking the Israelites. He knew that Goliath was mocking God, and he says, I will stand up for my God. And so he stood up and he says, I'll take him on. Next week, we're going to get into how he did it. But I want you to just be the person who gets your encouragement from the Lord, and you reject the discouragement of those around you. The enemy will try to discourage you, but sometimes the greatest discouragement comes from those people closest to you. And so hear from the Lord and get encouragement from him, even if everybody else is afraid. Next week is going to be really fun because you're going to see what God can do through a person who just is crazy enough to believe what God says.